Okay, Holcroft history, H-O-U-L. So my father, Tom Holcroft, planted for each child born in the family on the grounds at St. Gabriel's. I can do it, yeah, that's okay. That's all right, we can do it later if you want. I don't like the deaf to wait. Okay, so the beginning in 1953. Okay, these trees are planted on the grounds, yes, St. Gabriel's, Castle Hill. The trees grew for the next 67 years of growing. Strong, many branches. Sadly, due to extensions being built, some of these trees were being felled. So luckily, I was driving past in the area and I saw what was happening. So, and I was available to get a few stumps. I used my Holcroft charm. A good friend has turned this timber into mementos. So the timber may be passed on to the future Holcroft generations. So I'd like to think that the stumps that I retrieved are from 1962. The gum planted for Jackie, number 8. I'm pleased to say that most of the older trees remaining, standing tall and proud, just as Tom Holcroft did. 1953 to 2020. So have a look, and I've got them there. Have a look. Thank you. Eat, drink, be happy. Thank you very much. Good job. Put you on the.
Hello, my name is Stephen Lawler. Family have asked me to make some a eulogy, I guess, for Kevin. So before I start, just wanted to say cheers to Kevin. Thank you. I will talk about Kevin and my perspective as I started school at St. Gabriel's. I have a little bit of history. In his time, it was way before I was born. 94. Good innings, I say, for Kevin. Well done. Started at St. Gabriel's in 1933 until 1941. After school, he started working at St. Gabriel's as a kitchen hand. For 10 years he worked there. I would ask people, what did Kevin do after those 10 years? And a lot of people were saying, I have no idea. Maybe he was with family. I don't know, he was working as a shoemaker, or I don't know what he was actually doing. When at St. Gabriel's School, I left St. Gabriel's School. I was this young, naive boy, and the Christian brothers would say, you need to meet deaf people at St. Benedict's, at the St. Benedict School, or at St. Mary's Cathedral. There was deaf people that used to go there for the Sunday, and that was in August. That was the only places that we could go to meet. So then after school I thought, I'm going to go there and see who I can meet and go and have a look. So I went to the St. Benedict's, and so this is how we sign St. Benedict's. Because we have the benediction within the church. And so this was how we got together once a month. And the first time I got there, they were all St. Gabriel boys, and they were all using one-headed sign, and I just was like, whoa, I got no idea. Wow, what are they saying? Oh my gosh. Because at St. Gabriel's at that time, it was oral, so there was no sign. So all the old boys, including Kevin, said, come over here, come on. My school buddies, come on. And then they started to teach the one-handed alphabet. It was hard work. And then I started to improve my communication. That's when I started to feel really welcome. But St. Gabriel's boys, they are always together, and even still now. I think at that time it was a boarding school, you know, it was like a family together. Then after school, it didn't matter how old you were, young, the old, it didn't matter. We were all together as a family. Kevin and his wife Margaret were strongly involved in the Catholic Deaf community, in the Catholic Deaf Association. It was called CDA. Both were very involved, especially with Margaret. When Margaret passed away, that was 1998, Kevin went to a different place with his family. Moved around a few places before he went to, in the end, to Malorna. While at Malorna, my work at the Aperta Centre, I was the ex-director, and pastoral work I was doing, I started to visit Kevin at Malorna and the village. I used to visit quite regularly and really got to know Kevin very, very well. He, how can I explain it? His sense of humour, how can I explain that? He had wits. He loved to stir people. He loved to tease people. Every time I'd go and visit Kevin, he would talk about so many different things. It was amazing. The intelligence. He knew information about the football, about weather. He knew things about the backgrounds of so many different things. He loved history. His time at St. Gabriel's School, he loved to talk about his time at that school. It's like, how can you remember all those years ago? And many times I was like, oh yeah, I remember some of them. Then others I'm like, what? We were talking about something, and it was really hard to really stop him from talking about St. Gabriel's. So it's like, I just love to talk about it. I can get a word in sometimes. I think I'd come and talk to you and help him, but really he was helping me more. Before Kevin went to Malorna, it was quite a while before, his two sisters were living there as well, Monica and Maria. And I used to visit them as well at the same time. The two sisters all often talk very highly of Kevin. At Malorna, Kevin had a good heart. Jim Roberts, like every single night at 6 o'clock and the news was on, he would interpret. I mean, it was captioned, but he would interpret to Billy Sinclair, who was a deaf-blind man. And so Jim or Kevin would take it in turns and would tell him what was happening on the news, because it's hand over hand, because he was deaf-blind. Every night. It was just amazing. It was just beautiful. The heart that he had for people in Malorna. While at Malorna, Kevin picked up so many different types of hobbies. Knitting, crocheting, colouring in, just so many different things. Crocheting, red and green, a red and green cushion, he did one for me. And he gave it to me, I'm like, wow. He knew that I was a South supporter, so thank you very much, love that, that's beautiful. When I visit, we'd sit and chat, and I'd be like, okay, I better get going now. And he'd go, yep, okay, no worries. And then he'd keep going. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll see you later. Keep going, he'd keep going. It's like, all right, I'll see you next week. Yep, keep going. It's like, all right, I met you to the door now. Whew. It was almost like an extra half an hour actually to walk out. It was like making sure, okay, 1 hour limit, nah. 45 minutes, and I'd start saying my goodbyes so that I could make it to an hour, so I'm out on an hour. It was crazy back then. But I do actually miss those conversations. You know, some people say it's hard to communicate with other deaf people within Malorna, within that home. But Kevin was just so bright in there. It was so beautiful. Frustration with communication, so sitting down and having a chat with him was great. Kevin would say Malorna has been wonderful to him. He really enjoyed his stay at Malorna. He never complained, he always enjoyed it. He was comfortable. Oh yes, there were lots of building changes and things like that, but he still always enjoyed being there. He never really complained. He was so happy there at Malorna. That's all I have to say about Kevin, but in the end I would like to say I'm so pleased to have met Kevin and been a part of his life. I know I met him many, many years ago, but especially through my work at the Ephrata Centre. And once I retired, I'd still continued to visit him at Malorna as much as I could. And so I thank God for his life with us on earth. And I will always share that with all of you. And may God bless him, and thank you.
Can you thank him? Thank you from all of us for the time. That was so special. Thank you for the time.
You're welcome. Sorry, just one more thing to add. I would like to just mention Kevin loved his Parramatta Eels. He had the big jersey with the frame on the wall, yeah? Loved his Parramatta. We used to have the rivalries because I was South. But no, Parramatta South, we'd have a lot of those debates.
I'm Pop's grandson, Matthew, son of Michael. I'd just like to say a couple of words on behalf of my mum and my sister. Mum Nicole and I have great memories of Pop. From when Nicole and I were young, we would all go to Merrill Avenue to visit Nana and Pop. As we were both very young, I remember first learning the signs for eat and drink. Which for both of us was very important. We remember being able to grab Nana or Pop and get them to follow us and point to the Mr. Bean VHS, which we watched almost every time we visited there. He used to take us for walks through the laneway to collect macadamia nuts to go back and crack on the vice on his garage bench. Pop taught us there is more than one use for a goon bag. First, Pop would drink the cheap wine, blow up the bag, and he would put it in his vegetable garden to keep birds away, give it to us as a pillow, or use as a floaty in the pool. Pop always had another use for everything. Whether it was milk cartons, sauce jars, boxes, or goon sacks. Pop always managed to make something out of it. Pop was always tinkering, whether it was at Merrill Avenue or when he lived with us at South Wentworthville. He loved his garage, fixing and making things and showing them off. Pop never believed that anything was broken. It could always be fixed. Pop's love for small projects was passed on to Dad and then passed on to me. The only difference was Pop would finish things. Me and Dad never did. Pop loved all animals, and all animals loved him. From when we were younger, remember his 2 dogs, Jessie and Belle, and most recently, his best friend Tia. Pop's eyes would light up when he got to see Tia on Saturdays, when Mum would go over to pick up Pop to come to soccer, or when she would just go over for a visit with Tia because everyone knows how much he loves spending time with her. Pop was a storyteller. He would often love to talk about his upbringing, family, his school, and Nan. Pop travelled to many places, and he loved to tell us about all the places he had been to, show us photos and mementos that he had brought back. Pop enjoyed his sport, and that was something we spent a lot of time talking about. It was just a shame he was a Parramatta supporter. It wasn't just league though. He loved watching and talking about any sport, whether it was cricket, tennis, AFL, or rugby union. He also loved napping during the sport, where we would often come home, Pop would be asleep with his mouth open, catching flies. He loved watching me play soccer. If he couldn't make the game, he would always ask me how me and the team were going. Pop loved his home at the Lorna Village. He treasured his little place, his drawing, his painting, his knitting. He loved when people would visit, write to him and the residents, but most of all, he loved the staff. Pop was very cheeky and a great sense of humour, especially in his older age. Although he was cheeky, he was a genuine and humble man who was extremely proud of his friends and family. He was very excited to be able to meet his great-granddaughter, Kelsey. His eyes would light up when he saw her and will continue to talk about her. Pop brought joy and happiness to everyone who met him, and he has always had a good outlook on life. When Pop was a guest speaker at a seniors luncheon, he was quoted as saying, "It is essential to look at what we can do, not the things we will never be able to do again." Pop reminded the audience sitting there that looking at 4 walls or watching television all day was not an option. We have one life and we must live it to the fullest. Pop did exactly that. He lived life to his fullest. So if we could raise a glass, Pop's now up there with Nan having a cheap wine and having a VB with Dad. I'd like to thank you all for coming on behalf of Mum and Nicole and myself today. Thank you.
You do that? Yeah. I'm happy to be deaf. Okay. Okay, Kevin will always be remembered as a positive, creative, cheeky, and resilient character. He was unconditionally accepting of all, loved meeting new folk, and was curious about everything. Kevin was married to a dynamic and loving woman Margaret. Margaret was active in the deaf community and various deaf committees alongside Kevin, and they attended many conferences. Together they travelled extensively in Australia, and they went overseas, and they created a very, very happy home at Toongabbie that has always welcomed visitors. The gardens were full of flowers and vegetables. Kevin and Margaret ensured the two boys, Michael and Brendan, would see much of Australia. They would be involved in sport and always feel the love of these two gifted parents. As mentioned, Kevin's life spanned many changes, from single-handed Irish to two hands to Auslan, from country to Sydney, living the Depression, the Second World War, the boom Australian years, to the current COVID crisis. I have to read some recollections from his family. This is from Mary, a niece of Kevin, Ryan. Our cousins Michael and Brendan would play tricks on their mum and dad, sometimes by turning up the television so that it could hear it in bed at night, I guess. Then one night the neighbour from across the road arrived at the door, walked in and turned the TV down. It was a friendly home. It was a friendly home in Toongabbie and had much love. Auntie Margaret was always ready to put on lunch for visitors, invited or blow-ins. And Uncle Kevin was also ready to show off his latest project. He loved his woodwork and he was always making something. I remember when I was growing up, as Kevin and Margaret were my godparents, they would often take me and my sister Kay alongside on trips up to Woy Woy to visit family or to go to the beach in the school holidays. It was wonderful to go out in a vehicle. This is from Kevin's great nephew in America. This is from James Holcroft. He remembers, my fondest memories of Kevin are when he was messing around and joking with all of the nephews and nieces. It took me longer than I care to admit, realising he was missing out part of his middle finger. Before I realised, he would always shock us kids by pretending to get his finger stuck up his nose, and after pulling it out, he'd say that he'd lost half up there. Always entertained all the young children. At one of the big Holcroft Christmases at Colo, Kevin spent a good couple of minutes waiting for everyone in the room to give him his attention. He waited, and when one of the uncles was translating, he asked the crowd, what's the difference between a full swear and a half swear? When everyone was unsure, Kevin proceeded to show them the full swear, and then flipping us all off, and then his half swear, doing a half using. Rude and cheeky Uncle Kevin. In every memory I have of Kevin, he is smiling and laughing in the centre of attention. There's another memory from someone different. Kevin was a keen gardener, enjoying getting out into the countryside with Margaret, Michael and Brendan, and he loved having pets. There were many dogs over the years, and today Kevin is buried next to Margaret and also with the ashes of his much-loved dog, Tia. Kevin kept close relations with his siblings and made much effort to keep the family ties alive and full of fun and cups of tea. In recent years, he made the trip up to Casino to spend time with his brother Vince, enjoy the beautiful gardens, and to share a chilled ale or two in the hot casino summer. His interests were all sport, gardening, woodwork, travel in the earlier years, reading and art. Kevin was sitting in his recliner chair watching the cricket the night before he passed. Kevin has also had time in recent months to share with his fourth great-grandchild, lovely Kelsey, to Nicola and John. Leonie, Matthew, Cherie, Nicole, John and Kelsey have had such a special part to play in Kevin's life. They brought such joy to him, and it was with real pleasure that we were able to let the baby visit. Because of COVID, the baby couldn't come in, and we asked and said perhaps he might pass, and Kevin was able to meet the baby and have photos taken with the baby, which is a wonderful thing. And we often thought maybe that's what he waited for. Kevin shared much warmth and love with Leonie, Nicole, John, baby Kelsey, Matthew and Cherie. And I'd like to say apologies on behalf of his son Brendan and his two children, Kevin Jr. and Nerida, due to COVID lockdown, unable to come. Parramatta had a very loyal fan in Kevin Ryan. He was also good on the tooth. He enjoyed his food, all foods. I remember a time when he came to stay in my house in the bush. He loved the fact that we were off the grid. We had solar power and a wood stove. And he had many tips for me on how to live in the bush. He wasn't frightened to try a bit of our butchered beef and was curious and still tried a piece of eel. Not that he liked that. Kevin always followed the international and national news. He relished keeping up what was happening out in the bush via the regular supply of the Land magazine and many papers supplied by Kay. My brother Pat recalls, I loved to see the artwork that Kevin created. His recollections of the tough working life back on the farm were fascinating. He talked about his plants, politics, and poor old Parramatta, or St. George, depending on who was losing. He had a steady roll call of visitors, and for those who could not get to see him, there was much sharing about how he was going and what everybody else was up to. The fact that many non-deaf people learned to sign so that they could share with Kevin is a testament to how much people wanted to share with him. There's not enough time to mention each individual who shared Kevin's life. Apologies, but we would like to acknowledge Janelle from Malorna, who became a wonderful friend to Kevin. Also a big thanks to Pam Seymour for all her years of friendship and support for Kevin. All the translating for doctors every week. Thank you, Pam. Effita has been impressive in their support over the many years. Well done and thank you, Effita Centre. And the deaf community is an impressive community, helping each other, sharing news and keeping connections alive. So we say, God bless Uncle Kevin, up there with Margaret now, telling him he can leave the rude finger joke back in down here. No more, Margaret was saying. So, and God bless you all. Thank you. It's been an honour.